This is a long-term dream job offer, a chance to do what I've always wanted to do with my life. The opportunity to write the things I want to write and speak at the places I want to speak and follow my dream like never before. So I took him up on his offer. At the time of this writing, I've been with Dave for the last 7 months. And despite a successful book release under my belt, Gazelles, Baby Steps, and 37 other things Dave Ramsey taught me about debt, a dozen fun speaking engagements behind me, and the best months I've ever spent at a job, fear still exists. Particularly the fear that I might have done the wrong thing and made the wrong decision. I moved my family from Atlanta to Nashville. My daughter Ellie will start 2nd grade at the 3rd school she's attended. My wife left her core group of friends she's known for years. I left a really steady job and a whole host of freelance clients. I left my literary agent, who was amazing, and my original publisher, who was great as well. I left a lot behind, and the fear that I might have made the wrong decision still pops up. What if something horrible happens and I lose this job? I have no agent, no publisher, no job, and a family stuck in a state we don't really know. Perhaps even worse, I might have spent years chasing one thing only to realize that it was the wrong thing to pursue. I will have wasted years of my life traveling down the wrong path. It would be easy for me to feel that way about my career in advertising. The goal of an advertising career is to get a job at a big agency in a big city with big clients. I am 0 for 3 at that goal. I never once rode a scooter through an office or worked on a Super Bowl campaign or created a viral video that millions saw. More than that, my only experience with a real ad agency was getting my portfolio dissected by Mark while my mother-in-law waited for me in the parking lot. The worst part is that I used to kid myself that I was in advertising. At Autotrader.com, I would tell myself, any written words on a website are part of the brand experience for a customer, which makes what I write branding, which means I am technically in advertising. But the truth is that Autotrader.com had a marketing department, and I was not in it. I was in IT. I didn't really write advertising. I wrote instructional copy like, please enter a correct 5-digit zip code into the field. There were certainly shades of branding involved in some projects, and I sometimes got to write banner ads, but for the most part, I was not in advertising. What a waste of 12 years I'll never have back. If my dream is to write books, then I just spent a dozen years going down the wrong path. It's easy to think that way. But is it the truth? 6 years ago, author Donald Miller told me something. I let him know I wanted to write books, but was kind of floundering in advertising. With a kindness I did not deserve or understand at the time, he said, your career in advertising is important. It's a great way to learn how to encourage people to do things. That's a skill that will really serve you well when you start to write books. He was right. My years were not wasted in advertising. Those years became fodder for my dream job, the raw materials of life I needed back then to do what I am doing right now. I know sometimes it's scary to think that you might do the wrong thing. It's terrifying to imagine wasting your one shot. But let me assure you, nothing you do will be wasted. Every decision you make, every path you take, has the ability to contribute something you need to succeed at your dream. Tony Robbins, whom I probably couldn't dunk on, says, your greatest resource is resourcefulness. It's just a matter of seeing it that way. After a frustrating, seemingly unsuccessful 12 years, I no longer see my advertising career as a waste. It's a resource that continues to fuel my dream with real-life experiences, real-life hopes, and real-life stories. And that's exactly the kind of fuel your dream needs too. It would be easier if blank. There are a bajillion ways to fill in that blank. We already discussed time constraints, but when it comes to making excuses not to pursue our dream, we often create a fictional set of conditions that must occur for us to move. We create them because then we can feel better about currently wussing out. The funny thing is that we tend to say things we know we can't really do much about. It would be easier if I didn't have a full-time job. It would be easier if I didn't have kids. It would be easier if I had a wealthy relative who could bankroll me. It would be easier if I weren't married. Those are a few of the excuses I heard in my head when I started to write my first book, and they were senseless because I couldn't easily do anything about them other than complain and waste energy. It would be easier if I didn't have a full-time job. We always assume that more free time will equal more productivity, but often that isn't true. I personally tend to get more done when I am busy. But let's pretend that wasn't the case. Even if more time did equal more book writing, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. We weren't living lavishly when I got serious about my personal writing, but it turns out the hospital requires money for their services. So does the grocery store and the mortgage company. So wishing that I didn't have a full-time job was a stupid complaint. I had to make money somewhere, and Lowe's had run out of the trees that grow it. Move on. It would be easier if I didn't have kids. You know how many books I was able to write in all my free time before kids? 0. But parents often blame their inability to pursue their dreams on their kids. That's a fun cycle of shame and guilt to get on. Regret not following your dream. Blame your kids because you're busy. Feel guilty for blaming your kids and not loving them as much as other parents who don't blame their kids. Give up on your dream for a little while. Eventually, regret not following your dream again. Repeat. This one is even dumber than complaining about not having a job because I had kids. I could always quit my job. I should never quit my kids. It would be easier if I had a wealthy relative who could bankroll me. My dad is a pastor. Back when I was a kid, pastors didn't drive Rolls Royces. It's possible he was too lazy, but I feel it might have been a moral decision on his part. Hard to say. I didn't grow up wealthy. I used to be terrified that my mom would ask us to rock the Knights of the Round Table shirts instead of real polo shirts, which we couldn't really afford. We were by no means poor, but none of the minivans my mom drove ever had spinning rims. Wishing you were born into money or somehow had more of your own is a fun excuse because our society is laced with phrases like, you need to spend money to make money, and money makes the whole world go round. So if you were rich or your parents set you up with a trust fund, maybe it would be easier to do your dream. But guess what? I've never read the biography of someone successful that had a chapter titled, The Day I Found the Bag of Diamonds. And let's be honest, do the rich people you see in the tabloids always seem happy and content? Have you ever seen a cover of Us magazine that says, 10 years of no celebrities entering rehab. They're all too busy living their dreams. Usually it's the other way around. Money can't buy happiness, a thought I just came up with on my own and should probably trademark. And although I've met some happy, hard-working wealthy people, I've also met some incredibly miserable wealthy people too. Don't wait for money to save you. It would be easier if I weren't married. This one is ridiculous because I know it would have been impossible to ever write a book without my wife's support. You personally might be able to change the world at a young age, but I was really immature. The younger, single version of me was incapable of the discipline to sit down and actually do something meaningful. So fantasizing that my marriage is somehow preventing my dream is just dumb. If you find yourself spending much time on this excuse, chances are your dream is not the only thing that's suffering in your life. It's a gross excuse, but I've honestly made this one before, and when I did, it was during a time when my wife and I were in a really bad spot in our marriage. We ended up going to counseling and spending a lot of time on our marriage before I could even worry about my dream. If you're there in your marriage, get some help. And if you do, don't try to guess what the other people are in here for in the counselor's lobby. Apparently, folks don't like that. A spouse needs to be on the same page with you and a partner in what you are chasing. You never want to have them on the other side of your dream because the harder you lean into it, the further away you'll push them. Looking back on it, there's absolutely no way my first book would have ever seen the light of day without my wife's constant support, encouragement, and love. I'm not sure what your excuse is. Maybe you've never thought it would be easier if blank. But chances are, you've wasted time before spinning out on something that is never going to be. You can't go back and be born to a wealthier dad. You've got to be a mom or dad to your own kids. In most cases, you have to work. And if you're in a marriage that can be healthy but has hit a bump in the road, getting a divorce is not going to lead to instant dream fulfillment. Let go of the "it would be easier if." Less risk, more reward. There are thousands of possible risks, and I only covered a handful. Even if you get great at looking at them, even if you develop the best telescope on the planet, that won't eliminate risk completely. The only people who don't face risk are dead people. And they don't buy books, or at least aren't in our target audience, so I'm going to ignore the needs of the dead. The undead too while I'm at it. But there are ways to mitigate the risks you'll face as you pursue your dream job. There are methods to neutralize financial risks and personal risks and professional risks as you step out in your dream. There are tricks you can learn to shrink the risk you'll see along the way. And the surprising thing is that you can find those tips in the last place most dreamers look, your day job. Chapter 4. Falling in like with a job you don't love. For the first 10 years I held a day job, I thought about quitting at least once a week. I'd often wake up counting the number of remaining days I had to get up early that week. I'd run quitter's math in my head, playing out possible scenarios. If I stay at autotrader.com until 2009, I will have been here over 2 years, which will look better on my resume and give me something to say to my wife when she observes, "You always quit your job so fast." Not true, I'll say. I stayed at autotrader.com for 2 years. Every time I'd attend an annual team meeting, I'd think, this is probably my last one. When project deadlines would be extended, I'd imagine never seeing the end of the project. I'd be long gone by then. I've always obsessed about quitting my job. Then something weird happened in 2008. People started encouraging me to quit. Not because I had a bad attitude or they were sick of my performance. People were urging me to quit my job because I started to dream. The relationship between dream jobs and day jobs is so misunderstood in our culture that we think success at one means the instant death of the other. So when I signed a book contract in 2008 and saw my blog start blowing up, people came out of the woodwork to ask, when are you going to quit your job? With a degree of incredulousness that bordered on stupor, friends and family expressed shock at my sanity. Why haven't you quit yet? Why are you still there? In a culture of quitters, we assume dumping the day job is the first step when the dream starts to stick. Have dream, have small modicum of success, quit job. People ask me this constantly when I wrote my first book. They were so excited for me because surely it was going to happen soon. I was going to fulfill the great American dream. I was going to quit my day job. Even my boss regularly asked how long I was going to be at my job now that I had a book deal. She poked and prodded, often in a joking way, but she was not the only executive who said I wouldn't be around for long. This is tempting. When enough people ask when you're quitting, you start to feel dumb for staying. If one of our culture's definitions of success is to dump your day job, then staying at one can make you feel like a failure. Part of the reason people encouraged me to quit is that they assumed my dream was more lucrative than it was. Many people assume authors are paid a tremendous amount of money when they publish a book. Thanks to folks like Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, the general public believes that when you write a book, you get to wear platinum pants with a diamond fly. Thus far, not my experience. The truth is, I got a $30,000 advance for my first book. After taxes, my literary agent's fee, and a 10% tithe, I got about $13,000. Right, but what about royalties? The reality is that 95% of authors never see a dime of royalties. You have to sell back your entire advance before you earn $1 of your royalty. The first sales report I got from the publisher did not include a check. It was a statement that said I was $15,000 in the hole. I got a piece of paper that literally said my books had earned negative $15,000. People don't realize this, and so they still asked when I was going to quit. In order to respond, I had to reframe the entire conversation. I found the lottery example helpful. When friends would pester me about quitting, I would tell them I walked away from my publishing deal with 13 grand. I'd then say, if you won $13,000 in the lottery, would you quit your job? Of course not. No one would ever say, I'm out of here. Me and my 13 G's are moving to Mexico. If that example didn't work, I'd tell people how much my dream paid hourly. Dreams rarely pay well at first. In the first 4 years I consistently wrote a blog, a publisher paid me $13,000 for about 2,300 hours of writing. That's about $5.65 per hour. The federal minimum wage is currently $7.25. At the time, I could have earned more working at Starbucks than I could writing a book in Starbucks. But the money issue is only one small part of the reason I stayed at my day job nearly 2 years after I received my book contract. Money mattered, but it wasn't the main issue. The real reason I stayed at autotrader.com is that if I'd quit my day job too soon, I would have killed my dream job. the incubation of a dream. How long does it take for your dream to become a full-time job and sustain you? Longer than you want it to. I don't know the exact answer for you, but every dream takes longer than you want it to. Our time frame is always shorter and faster than what a dream has in mind. And if we rush it, if we don't give it time to incubate, we usually end up killing it before it even has a chance to breathe. The year 2008 was a crazy year for me. On March 21st, I started StuffChristiansLike.net, which instantly exploded into a global platform. That fall, Zondervan offered me a book deal. I also got invited to speak at Dave Ramsey's organization. I'd only spoken professionally once before I drove to Nashville to address the entire staff of about 300 people. I was nervous because I knew they'd recently had a famous musician come in and do the same thing. I made a joke about that during my speech. At the end, they all gave me a standing ovation, and Dave Ramsey said from stage, "That famous musician didn't get a standing ovation." I'd say his name, but he lives in Nashville near me and is apparently working out a lot these days. After a tour of the building, I walked to my car on cloud 9. A member of their web team chased me down in the parking lot and said, "Jon, what would you think about working here? We've got a web copywriting position open that I think you might be perfect for." I remember calling my wife on the drive home to Atlanta and telling her that we were probably going to move to Nashville soon. We both called our parents and shared the exciting news. Inside I thought, this is it. Finally, my dream of not working a day job is coming to fruition. It's all coming together. I'm going to quit Autotrader.com. That was a this is it crossroads moment. When we fantasize about how our dreams will come to life, we often think of them like this. We're walking by a football field when a ball lands at our feet. The coach yells, "Hey kid, throw that ball back." In a moment of profound dexterity, we unleash a perfect 60-yard spiral into the end zone and the waiting arms of a shocked receiver. The coach drops his clipboard in astonishment, and we start our first NFL game that Sunday. We've been discovered. But I'm pretty sure that's not how most dreams work, despite Hollywood's efforts. I think there are certainly exciting moments when an opportunity vaults you over a number of hurdles, but in general, I think they take longer than that. Mine did. I didn't end up taking that job from the Ramsey team in the fall of 2008. Months later, I turned down another position. Over a 2-year period, I spoke at 3 company-wide meetings before finally accepting my dream job in the summer of 2010 when Dave approached me personally. But let's pretend that I did accept that first opportunity. I would have come on board as a web copywriter. It's a great position, and one I've done in some form or the other for 10 years of my career. I would have loved the team, and the work would have been more fulfilling than other jobs I had. But by accepting that job and declaring myself a web copywriter, I would have forever killed the dream job I ended up with at Dave Ramsey. The job they offered me in 2010 was essentially to be a full-time speaker and a full-time author. After watching me grow my brand, platform, and dream for 2 years, they were confident it was a mission they wanted to support. It's unlikely I would have arrived at the same place had I taken the job as a web copywriter. They would have been supportive of Stuff Christians Like, but it would have been impossible for them to see me as someone they could mold into a new message bearer if instead of patiently growing my dream, I had spent 2 years telling them I was a web copywriter. I would have quit my job at Autotrader.com and ruined my dream before it had fully grown into what it is now. Autotrader.com gave me time to slowly incubate my dream, to make mistakes that didn't cost too much, and try new things with much smaller risks. Although I had written online before, I didn't know what a blog was when I started there in 2006. By the time I left, my dream had become something big and powerful and true. My dream had a fighting chance because it spent time maturing while I held on to my day job. I'm not the only one who had a day job while chasing a dream job either. Turns out a guy named Leonardo da Vinci did too. In the book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, author Michael J. Gelb talked about how da Vinci often had to serve as a party planner for the patrons who sponsored him. He wrote, "It's amazing to imagine a genius of Da Vinci's stature devoting his time to the design of pageants, balls, and costumes. Yet as Kenneth Clark points out, this was expected of Renaissance artists between Madonnas." Leonardo da Vinci, widely regarded as one of the greatest artists who ever lived, worked a day job while he pursued his passion. Chances are, you will too. But that doesn't mean it has to be miserable. I think we do a tremendous disservice to our dream jobs when we talk about pursuing them to the detriment of our day jobs. If a dream is going to take us 10 months or 10 years to realize, we can't accept heartache or horror 40 hours a week. It's the platform and the prison principle. If you're patient and deliberate, your day job can become a wonderful platform from which you can launch your dream job. If you demonize your day job, though, and rail against it, it becomes a prison you'll try to escape from. And prison breaks rarely go well for anyone. The truth is, we need to learn to fall in like with a job we don't love, because it's actually the best way to set up your dream for success. What does your dream have to do with your job? We like to pretend sometimes that we are made up of a system of buckets. We like to think we can live what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, moments in one area of our lives without affecting the other areas. It's just not true. If you're ailing in one portion of your life, it tends to infect the other portions. If there's poison in a glass of water, no one says, "Be careful, the middle of that water is poisoned." The same principle applies to your work. Bad employees make horrible dreamers. You can't loaf on your day job all week and then expect to magically throw the switch on the weekend and hustle on your dream. The things you do on your day job tend to follow you home. I didn't believe this until I started to actively change the way I behaved in meetings. I was having a hard time listening at home. As soon as my wife would start saying anything I didn't find interesting, I would tune out. I've never been a great listener, but this was getting out of hand. One day in a meeting at autotrader.com, I realized what was going on. Every week, 5 days a week, I was checking out in meetings. Most of the meetings I went to did not have earth-shaking implications for my life. So in a lot of them, I got bored. I would daydream about things I wanted to do, run through my personal to-do list, or try to think what my favorite word might be. I settled on a tie between nougat and bungalow. Then, after hours and hours of not listening to other people talk, I would go home and act surprised that it was difficult to listen to my wife. It was happening because for 40 hours a week, I was training myself not to pay attention to people. It was happening because we are whole people and can't separate ourselves into buckets. That's the biggest reason it's critical you work hard at your day job. You're not just working, you're practicing for your dream. Even if they're completely unrelated, and I'm not sure they are, the effort you invest in work will return big dividends to your dream. If you want your dream job to work on your day job. Remember why you work. I have what dentists call lottery mouth. I don't technically know if they've ever used this phrase, but they should. Because when dentists look inside my mouth, they envision ski boats and second homes and college tuition for their kids. I've got fillings to be replaced, cavities from having braces 3 different times, and an endless goldmine of wisdom teeth to extract. And the day before a big speaking event one year, I even had an emergency root canal. It started at 4 a.m. Waves of pain every 40 minutes. The right side of my face would turn gray. One eye would go red. And I would enter a small space in my head where my dying tooth would scream, "There is no pain in this dojo." But there was pain in that dojo. Oh, there was. I went to work and tried to tough it out. I scheduled an appointment with a root canal specialist and then set my stopwatch to 24 hours because that's how long I had to make it. By the time my appointment rolled around, I wanted to front hug the dentist. I was so happy to be there. I was moments away from freedom. I was on the edge of relief, and I was ecstatic. But it didn't quite go the way I thought it would. 90 minutes into the procedure, I was still in agonizing pain. Apparently, I have roller coaster roots that flip and turn inside my teeth. The dentist couldn't just use an electric tool to kill them. Instead, he had to also use hand tools and slowly twist his way with a long, thin file into tiny holes he had drilled into my teeth. Imagine someone spinning a titanium needle back and forth between their thumb and index finger deep inside your tooth for an hour and a half. I asked for more Novocaine. Based on the pain I was in, I figured the dentist would say, "Sure, hook up this Camelback hydration system and drink it through a straw. Have all you want. It's pineapple flavor. You'll love it." Instead, he said, "I can't give you any more. I've already reached the limit of what you can handle. If I give you any more, your vision will blur." My first thought was, for how long? I'm not reading a book right now. I'll get a cab to take me home. Are you saying my vision will blur forever or just for a few hours? I promise I don't need perfect vision for the rest of this day. I'm not performing any open heart surgeries. Give me the Novocaine. He wasn't budging. So I sat there with bolts of electricity shooting through the nerve highway of my mouth. I thought I had reached the worst point until I felt a hygienist place something small in my hand. Did that really just happen? I thought to myself. Did a hygienist just place a ball in my hand to squeeze because it's about to get even worse? What century am I in? I'm not getting a Pancho Villa bullet removed on a battlefield right now. A ball? Seriously? Is there a strap of leather I can bite down on too? Just go ahead and give me a shot of whiskey while you're at it and heat up a blacksmith's iron to cauterize the wound. On that day, driving home from the endodontist's office, it was not difficult to understand why I worked. I had purpose and motivation to continue being an awesome employee. I would have worked at a sewage plant that day if it meant I could pay for the mouth demon to be exorcised. We forget those things sometimes. We get really focused on our own stuff and our own dreams, and we lose sight of the many, many reasons it is critical that you do great work at your day job. That's why, as I write this, I'm wearing a silly band. I have 2 little daughters, and although sometimes silly bands are used as currency at our house, much the same way cigarettes are used in prison, they help me remember one of the big reasons I work. I work so that my kids can eat and wear clothes and sleep indoors. Sometimes I forget things like that. In the midst of chasing my dreams, I get lost in being selfish and self-serving. I act like I'm the captain of my own planet, and my actions only impact me. There's a wild amount of self-confidence needed to successfully chase a dream, and it's easy for that to mutate into pride and arrogance. So it might be good to remind yourself why you're working. And that's not an exercise that only moms and dads can go through. Regardless of whether you have kids, it's good to reconnect to the often quiet reasons you actually go into work. Be honest. When is the last time you thought to yourself, number 1, I'll be able to eat this week because I went to work. Number 2, I'll be able to sleep out of the rain this week because I worked. Number 3, I'll get to wear shoes today because I have a job. Number 4, if I break my pelvis, I will have the insurance to pay for it. Number 5, I will not have to canal my own roots because I work. Number 6, I'll be able to support a non-profit organization because I work. Those apply to everyone, not just parents or spouses. Take 5 minutes and write down all the reasons you really work. The better you know them, the easier it will be for you to fall in like with a job you don't love. And if you're having a tough time coming up with them, try these methods. Look for parallels. A year ago, I spent almost every morning of the week writing satirical observations about church and Christianity. I spent almost every day of the week writing technical copy for an IT company. In the mornings, I would blog, please don't interlink digits with me at church if the minister asks us to hold hands. I don't know you that well, stranger, and it makes me feel like we're going to make out. In the afternoons, I would write the 2-word label, Credit Center. That was how I spent a good deal of my job, writing labels and error messages and instructions on how to use a financial calculator. It was not glamorous work. It was not the fountain of creativity I might have been looking for, but there was a direct parallel. It was not difficult to see that learning to write with brevity and clarity at work provided direct benefits to my ability to write with brevity and clarity at home. But what if you work at Starbucks and want to be a songwriter? What if you work at a